All right. How's everyone doing?
I'm doing well.
Good, how are you?
Doing well, thank you.
Happy New Year's. This always seems like
Thank you. Likewise.
so. This is going to be something like day 6 or 5 or something
Six.
like that. Day
Day
6.
six.
Okay.
Anything we should be talking about before we look at beeps?
Um, let's see. I don't there's nothing from my end.
Okay.
Okay.
And
So when did you wear the beeper?
So I wore the beeper a bit last night and a bit this morning.
So like how many did you collect last night? How many this morning?
I got, let's see. I had two last night, two full ones last night and three this morning.
Okay. And when you say full ones, was there an issue or is it like you missed one or
There was one where I got the beep and then the moment I went to write it down, I like couldn't figure it out
okay.
anymore. Okay.
All good, no problem. So no questions, problems.
so I
No.
do have a question about that. So when you went to write it down, you couldn't figure it out. What exactly does that mean?
That means that uh it was like for the moment of the beep, I knew what was in my experience. But some combination of like the beep kind of startling me a little bit and the continuation of the beep from the very first note um just interfered with it. And then once I went to write it down, I just didn't remember anymore.
Okay. So you felt like at the if you could have written it down or whatever immediately without having to find your notebook or whatever, you could have done it. But
Yes, yes.
by the time you wrangled the notebook, or
Yes, there was definitely feelings in my experience and stuff like that. They just disappeared really quickly.
okay, all right, then I'm ready to go to beep number 1. And Amber, are you first or am
Okay.
I first?
You're first.
Okay.
Okay. So beep number one. So in this beep, I was playing a game of chess, and I was looking at a uh, a formation on my opponent's uh, of my opponent's pieces, which was two pawns and a bishop in a particular pattern. And the formation was definitely in my experience. And there was some sensation that there was something kind of weird about it. Weird in a not in a chess way, but in a visual way, like it looked kind of like a snake or something like that. I wasn't thinking of it as a snake, but I think that's why I thought there was something weird about it. And I was considering if my rook could attack the bishop successfully.
So I'm looking at the formation and some sensation of weirdness,
Yes.
and how and I'm considering whether my rook can attach my bishop. Which does one of those seem more present than the other?
Um, the consideration of whether my rook could attack the bishop.
Is more present?
Yes.
60-40-ish, 90-10-ish?
I would say 90-10 is about right. Probably 80-20 is closer though.
Okay. And then how did that considering go?
The considering was in that moment, it was just the thought of can my rook attack the bishop?
And how does that thought present itself to you?
Uh, it's it's the thought of um a general direction upward from the bishop, which is where my rook would be if I moved it to attack it. And so it's that general sense of direction and sort of like a question, which is, will this be successful? That's not a verbal question, but it is in my mind.
So does that mean that there's sort of two aspects present about this? There's the direction and there's the wondering or considering, thinking about whether this would be successful?
I suppose there are, but it didn't feel like it. It felt
That,
like that was all one thing.
that seemed like one thing. Okay.
Hmm.
And so let's start with the thinking portion. Is the thinking portion directly present to you, or is that a way of telling us what this direction meant?
Um, it was directly present to me.
So I am somehow thinking about whether this move would be successful.
Yes, yes. And actually, that is present to me in a different way now that I think about it. The way it was that the way the thinking portion, the way the question was present was trying to predict the next move of my opponent if I did that. So um, I wasn't actively trying to I wasn't actively predicting a move in that moment, but I had the intention to think about what the next move would be.
So something like, if I make this move, what would I do next?
Or it's something like, if I make this move, what would my opponent do next?
Okay. And so that doesn't have anything necessarily about successful in it. Does that
I
mean
sub
we're revising and say, well, it wasn't really about successful, it was about what's going to happen next?
No, it was also about successful. Um, so that was definitely part of it, was what the next move would be. But there was like a sense of, okay, so by successful, I guess there was a sense of, it wasn't necessarily success. I feel like a better way of putting it would be winning the bishop. There was a sense of, will I win the bishop? Will the bishop be mine?
And that's basically transmitted to you by considering the next move, and if the next move doesn't take your rook, then you'd be successful. Is it?
It was, if the next move can't defend the bishop, I would be successful. And the vague sense of, does he have some ability to defend the bishop, was there.
Okay. And this, I'm gathering, is some sort of cognitive analytical process. Is that fair?
Hmm.
But doesn't include words or pictures. I don't have pictures of what the next move would
Yeah,
be. You know, it's not like
I,
rook is present or bishop would be present or attack or whatever, defend.
not in that moment. No, no words or pictures. The only thing that wasn't just like a strictly cognitive would and like maybe slightly sensory would have been the sense of direction upwards from the bishop. And of course I was looking at this structure, and the structure was there in my vision.
Okay. So there's a sense of directionality from the bishop.
Mhm.
And then there's an analytical, can he defend it? Will this be successful? Whatever.
Yes.
Okay. Anybody have any questions about that? Okay.
No, I think I got it.
And
Oh,
then,
actually, I do have a question.
Okay.
In the previous sampling day, I don't know if it's the previous one or like a couple days ago, you had a beep, where your sister, you were saying like, can she do that? That kind of whole situation with, if your sister was able to make the move, she had the card. Is this,
Mhm.
is the cognitive portion of this rook and the bishop and all of that, is that similar to that kind of thought, or is it different? And if it is,
I'd say it's the same, actually. It's the
okay,
same kind of thinking.
okay, okay, that's all.
Okay.
and then there is the seeing of the shape of this display, I guess, the rook and two pawns.
Hmm. Or the bishop and two pawns.
Bishop and two pawns,
Mhm.
and that it's somehow weird.
Yes.
And this is a minor thing, 10 or 20%.
Yes.
And is the weirdness immediately present in the shape? I'm seeing this weird shape, or is it I'm seeing the shape and I'm somehow thinking, cognizing, and analyzing to myself, well, that's sort of weird.
Yeah. It's definitely not present in the shape. I don't even understand why I thought it was weird in that moment, really. Um, I think maybe it was because I thought it looked like a snake, but that wasn't like in my experience in that moment. Uh, so I don't know why I thought it was weird. It was just there's just a sense of that's weird.
Okay. And is the sense that that's weird of the same ilk as the will my bishop, can I get the bishop? Will I keep the bishop? Is there
Um,
is that the same thinking kind of process?
no, I don't think so. It was more like because that was an active process. That was like I was purposely intentionally trying to think through. In this case, the feeling of weird was like something that just sort of happened to me. Yeah, I didn't act, I wasn't like analyzing. It just sort of came over me.
So I'm understanding that one is more active and one is more coming to you receptive, I guess. But
Yes.
but but given that those differences, does it still seem like the thought process is the same, or does it seem like they're different?
It feels very different to me. Yeah.
So I'm somehow apprehending the weirdness of this.
Hmm.
And that apprehension is different from thinking about whether I would keep the bishop as that move safe or whatever.
I think so, but I'm also not necessarily sure what kind of distinction you're wondering about.
Well, that's good because I don't know what kind of distinction I'm wondering about. I'm trying to
Mhm.
find if there is a distinction. The kind of
Okay.
distinction could be that one of them seems analytical and one of them seems emotional. That would be one possibility, but I'm not
Yeah.
in favor of that.
I was going to say something like that, because I think that captures it somewhat, but um, I think it's more like the receptive versus active thing. I uh, kind of makes them so different that it doesn't really feel like they could be the same otherwise.
Okay, and that's
Mhm.
fair too.
Okay.
And it's only 10 or 20%, so it's probably not a good idea to try to make too fine a distinction about something that's pretty minor to begin with.
Sure.
So I'm good. You have questions about that, Emery?
Um, I think I'm good as well.
Number two.
Okay, number two. So this was there was a I was also playing a chess game while I was doing this. This was the last one where I'm playing a chess game. And as I was in my head was just the words Monday night in a southern accent. And this was while I was looking at the chessboard and vaguely just trying to find some sort of attack I could mount on my opponent. So that's beep number two.
So, what is in your experience at the moment of the beep?
It was the vaguely trying to find an attack I could mount, and it was the southern accent saying Monday night.
Okay, and when you say vaguely, is that what do you mean by vaguely?
It's like my uh concentration powers were like really not there at that moment, and it was not much was happening in my head. Um and so basically I was just sort of looking around the chessboard without thinking too hard with the intention of figuring out something I could do. Um yeah.
Okay, and I'm getting that there's two aspects of this this beep here. So is there any that's more salient? And if so,
In that moment, it was the Southern accent saying Monday night.
okay, like 80/20, 60/40.
I would say I would say 60/40.
Okay. So let's start with the Southern accent. So,
Actually,
um,
I'll revise it to 70/30. I think is
okay,
probably more accurate.
okay, no problem. So we'll still
Can,
start
can,
with
can I
that.
can I ask a preliminary question? Is
Sure.
is night a K word or an N word?
Oh, N-word.
And does it have anything to do with chess?
No.
Okay, then go for it, Amber.
Okay. So, tell me more about that Monday night. Yeah.
So this was not me actively try. I don't even know like what this was. This was just like a random voice that was in my head for a moment. I wasn't trying to make it happen. Um, I wasn't. I wasn't even imagining anything. It was just I was a little bit tired, and it just was in my head. The word Monday night in a Southern accent.
Okay. So, um, is this something that you're saying in, is this like in your voice?
It's
Is this
not.
Southern accent in your voice, or is this someone else's voice? It was just, or are you hearing this? Are you saying this?
Mhm.
Or,
It's someone else's voice, and I'm hearing it.
okay.
And it did feel kind of strange because usually when I hear stuff in my head, even when I'm like imagining someone else's voice and I'm hearing their voice in my head, it's intentional. But in this circumstance, there was no intent behind it at all. It was just happening.
Okay. And when you say this felt strange, is that present to you at the moment of the beep, or is that as I'm describing it to these guys now, I feel it?
As I'm describing it right now.
Okay. So that's more. Okay. So and this someone else's voice, is there a specific someone? Or are you just, this is not my typical,
Yeah, there's no specific someone that I know of. Um, it was just like a character invented in my head almost.
okay. And you said innerly, oh well, it's like I'm hearing it in my head. Um,
Hmm.
so is it like if I were to be hearing it from a video, or I'm, you know, but no doubt I'm producing the words, but it's like somehow I'm hearing it
Right.
as if it were in the environment. Like, could you tell me more
It
about
didn't sound like it was outside of my head. So I knew it was in my head. Like I knew it wasn't a real voice.
that? Right.
And it did actually kind of feel it did literally feel like it was in my head.
But
Like
is there a, oh, go ahead.
directionally speaking. Like it felt like it was
Okay.
like up here or something.
Oh, so there's a physical
Yes.
location. Okay,
Hmm.
and where is that again?
It's like up here
Okay.
at like the top of my head basically.
Okay. And does it feel like would you say that did it feel like you were like producing these words, or
No, it
it
did
just
not.
okay. 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 Do you have any more questions about that?
Male voice, female voice, computer voice, hard to tell.
Male voice.
Deep, deeply male.
No, it was slightly higher pitched.
Okay. And the southern accent, a deep, a deep South southern accent, or just a little bit of a hint of a southern accent.
It was deep. It was a deep South Southern accent. And it was also it was like night was drawn out. So it was like Monday night basically. I don't know. It was kind of like the somebody announcing it was like somebody was announcing it over I don't yeah, that no, it cut that part out. I don't I don't know how I can explain that, but yeah, it was drawn out.
So does it have the characteristics of an announcement and
It had the
like a
characteristics,
loudspeaker?
yeah. Well, it felt like a I guess. Oh, by the way, I liked the Saturday Night Live video. I thought that was enjoyable. But it was kind of like, you know, when they announced it's Saturday night,
Right.
live Saturday night, whatever the announcement is at the beginning. Kind of like that kind of feeling where they're announcing it in a sort of fun, lively way.
Okay. And is that and are you referring to the characteristics of the voices as opposed to the auditory features of the voices? Like if you were in a football stadium and somebody says, come back for the next game on Saturday night, you not only would it be drawn up, but it would have echoey or whatever loudspeaker.
Right. There wasn't anything echoey about it. It's more about just the energy in the voice.
Okay. So the energy in the voice is sort of like a high energy, happy go lucky
Yes. Mhm.
voice. Got it. So what I'm gathering from that is this is a pretty specific hearing. This is not, it's random because I don't know where it's coming from, but I know exactly what I'm hearing. This is,
Yes.
mhm.
Okay. And the attack, I could mount the vaguely find the attack. Tell me more about that.
Yes. So I was it's in the same way that like oftentimes sometimes you're distracted or tired, you're reading a book and you just read like a paragraph and then you realize you didn't actually understand any of it. You
Okay.
sort of had the intention to read the paragraph in that moment. Sure, it was probably there to some small extent. Uh, in the same way, I sort of had this vague intent to analyze the board and then find an attack. However, uh, I wasn't doing it very productively. I was just sort of it was just the intent and like my eyes were scanning the board fruitlessly. But that wasn't part of my experience. It was just the vague search
So when you say,
or vague
so is
intent.
this more of an intention? Is this like a searching? Is this like a cognitive process? I'm thinking of what I'm gonna do, uh,
Or a
It's
or
visual,
something else could be something
or a
else.
visual searching.
Yeah.
yeah, I it's honestly it's almost more wishful thinking, yeah, if anything. Like the it was uh there was an intent behind it, but it was also there was intent, but also probably most of what I'm describing now was actually more of a hope, like a hope that I would find something.
Okay. And we say, is that hope like a feeling or something else
Yes,
going on?
it's like it's actually yeah, it's an almost an excitement, like oh, I wonder if I could do this, that kind of thing. So there's an excited hope there, and it is a feeling. It's not yeah, it is definitely and there's some emotion behind it. Uh it's a somewhat enjoyable sensation. So I feel like maybe I'm going a little too I'm analyzing it too much right now.
Yeah, yeah. It's a 30% deal, so
Okay.
it's not too deep. Uh, uh, so I guess what I'm trying to get at is this like a because you've used words like intention, wishful thinking, searching.
Hmm.
So is this like I have like an intention that has this kind of positive connotation to it? Is this like I take you to be saying that that's kind of what's going on here.
Yes, I had an intention that was supplemented or I don't know, complemented by, yeah, I would say I had an intention that was at the same time complemented by this kind of wishful hope.
Okay,
And the searching part was not part of my conscious experience. I was
okay,
not that I was doing it, but it wasn't part of my conscious experience.
got it. Okay. Do you have any more questions, Dr. Hill?
Nope, I'm good. Number three.
Okay. So number three is the one that had a I lost when I got to the notepad out. I just wasn't able to write anything down.
Okay.
so I can move straight to 4.
Okay.
Okay. So that was this morning, and it was the words. I was watching a video for context, and I think it had something to do with coronavirus. And so what was in my conscious experience were the words "stay home" in a serious voice, which was a newscaster's voice, and that was part of my experience. It was the experience of a newscaster's serious voice saying "stay home." That was happening in the real world as well. It was in the video, and it also came with a sense of um, a recent dramatic past, and also in my experience was the visual of a green and blue news anchor's room where they sit and do interviews, that kind of thing. But it was just like the green and blue newscaster's room that was in my visual experience.
And is some of this more prominent than others?
The words stay home are more prominent.
Okay. And is stay home both in the real world and in your experience somehow?
Uh, yes, yes. When I said it's in the real world, I was just giving context that the it was actually in the video I was watching, but it was in my experience. I was attending to it.
So am I hearing the announcer say stay home, or am I imagining an announcer saying stay home that is somehow in parallel to the real world hearing?
I am hearing the announcer or the newscaster in the video saying "stay home."
Okay. So this is a straightforward perception of the real world, not a creation of my own, setting aside the philosophical argument that everything is always a creation of my own perception is creative.
Mhm.
I agree with that. But the impression which I have is I'm hearing the announcer say, "Stay home."
Yes.
Okay. And then there's there was something that I missed the word of a recent dramatic something. But I missed the word.
Right. It came the voice "stay home." That came with a sense of like a recent dramatic past.
And is that again a characteristic of the voice? I hear this guy saying "stay home" with the implication that something had happened recently. And
It was not a characteristic of the voice. It was not. It was a characteristic more of the video I was watching. However, the yeah, I would say it wasn't a characteristic of the voice. It was more something I was associating with the voice. So like if I just heard that voice, I wouldn't say, "Oh, there's a sense of a recent dramatic past there." It was in the context of the video.
so I guess I still don't understand exactly what the experience
Okay.
is. So the by recent dramatic path, I don't I don't understand
Past.
what's the word?
Past.
Past. Recent dramatic past. So so the so stay home is referring to a dramatic event that's happened in the recent past.
Right. I mean, it's just referring to coronavirus in general. Um, uh, s- so I wouldn't say it's referring to it wasn't referring to an event. It had to do with an event.
Okay.
Mhm.
And is that event which particular event present to you, or is it just
Uh, it it was. Um, Actually, I don't think it really was in that moment. It was just the sense of general, generally a recent dramatic past.
So arising in me at the moment of the beep are sort of two things. One is I hear the announcer say, "Stay home," and I have some sense of a dramatic event in the nearby past.
Hmm.
Is that right?
Yes.
And that dramatic event was probably referred to in the video, came from the video. But what exactly what we're talking about, I don't really. What is that event is not specified to me.
Not in that moment.
Mhm. And is the recent dramatic past a prominent feature of this, or is it just a slight flavor of it? Or?
It's a, it's a, I would say when it comes to, I would say it was, I would say the word stay home and the sense of the recent dramatic past, I would say those two are about equal.
Okay. And is there anything more to say about how the dramatic past is present to you?
Um, yeah, probably a little bit. There was also like the drama part. When I say dramatic, it also had a sense of, I guess, intrigue. Um, because this was like a documentary. It was supposed to be some sort of expose. So there was like a sense of intrigue there as well. Like, did things go wrong uh, in the government or something like that?
Okay. And and is that present to you as a picture? I see the government screwing up, or as
It
a
wasn't really.
cognitive recollection, or
I
can't
think
even
it
say
was.
can't even
I
say.
think. Hmm, yeah, I would say it was present to me as just as a feeling, just as a feeling, and it's hard to say exactly what that feeling is. Uh, but it's sort of the feeling. I would say it's more than just a feeling of intrigue. I would say it's the feeling of like documentary intrigue specifically. Because in documentaries that they have this particular way of making things sound a little bit scary and
Stay
ma
tuned so that I can tell you about the.
exactly that kind of thing. Mhm.
And that sense is somehow present to me that I'm
Yes,
like documentarily intrigued, or whatever.
yes.
It is a feeling that I've come to hate, but I know it.
Okay.
All right. And then there's a green and blue news anchor's room.
Yes. That was just I don't know what more to say. It was the background of the news anchor's room, uh like the weird green screen kind of thing that they have. It was this kind of green and blue colored gradient, and the panel that they were sitting in had like a green blue thing on the front of it. So, and then there were two people.
So I see a fully articulated scene, apparently. Is that right?
Hmm. Yes.
Of which the most prominent aspect was the green and blue screen that's behind the two people.
Um, I don't know if I can say that was necessarily the most prominent aspect.
Okay. So I see two people in a newscaster kind of situation.
Hmm.
And by two people, are these people looking at each other, or are they looking at at the audience, like two side-by-side newscasters?
They're not looking anywhere. Not it. It's like I don't know where they're looking. In other words,
Okay, so what I'm trying, does it make sense to ask whether these are both of them are newscasters, or is one a newscaster and the other an interviewee?
I would say they're both newscasters, definitely.
Okay. And blue and green is a characteristic of this scene
Hmm.
somehow.
Hmm.
And I gather that it was both in front and in back of them. Is that right?
Yes.
And can you say more about that?
That's because there was a background, but also, you know how in like when you're watching the news, it's often the case that there's some sort of panel in front of their seats, or like I guess just to obscure the seats or something like that. I don't know why, or like a big desk that has
Big desk or table or something.
yeah, that had like a that was blue and green down to the floor.
Okay. And 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 is the behind them blue and green floor to ceiling one sort of uniformly deal?
But what do you mean by that?
Well, if one sees a green screen, it is a green, same color of green from beginning to end. The object of a green screen is to have no definition at all, just one
Right.
solid green screen,
Right. Okay.
solid green area.
Hmm.
And is that what you see? Is one solid green area, or is it a gradient from green to blue, which would
It's a
make it not a
gradient.
green? And does that mean that green is above and blue is below, or vice versa, or side to side, or something?
Green is in one corner, and then blue is in the opposite corner. And when I think about it, I do not know which corner it is.
Okay.
I just know that they're opposite corners.
And and is this anchor's room more present or less present than the stay home and dramatic past? Or are they all equal?
The visual is much less. So when it comes to the stay home and dramatic past, I would say that occupies like I'd say it's like 90% as opposed to the 10% of the visual.
But the visual has the characteristics of a inner imaginary visualization. I see news anchors and with these blue and green colors.
Oh, no, that's actually in the video. That's not that's not imaginary to me in that moment. That's something I'm actually seeing.
So what that means then is that this experience, your experience is pretty much driven by what you're seeing and hearing, with the exception of the dramatic intrigue that is arising in you, but
Hmm.
that was the intention of what you're seeing and hearing, probably.
Right.
And I think I'm good.
Okay.
I'm good too.
Number five.
Okay. Okay. I was also watching a video here, and for context, it was a YouTube video of somebody playing like a video game. So in my conscious experience at that moment were the words "trusting him is," and that was it. The voice was that of a familiar, comforting voice of a female who's like a character in the video game, and so I know the video game, so it's I like there are associations that I have with the voice because I'm familiar with it. Um, and that voice was actually in the video. And then also in my experience was part of the visuals of the video, and there were kind of like they were going in an elevator, and there were the door was composed of these triangles. So what was in my experience was looking at those triangles on the elevator and wondering what they are. That was in my visual experience, was those triangles, and that came with a sense of wondering what they are.
Okay. And of these characteristics, is there anything that's more salient? Is everything the same?
The trusting him is the voice, those words, that's the most salient. And I would say that that is similar to the last one where I was mostly focusing on the audio. So maybe 90-10. So 90% was the voice, 10% was the triangles combined with this sort of wondering what they are.
Okay. So trusting him is, right? That's what is being said?
Yes. Hmm.
Okay. And you said that you're hearing this in the voice of the character from the game?
Yes. And it's
Okay.
sort of a comforting voice.
So is that comforting voice, is that a description of the voice, or is there some kind of comforting sensation or aspect of this experience?
I think it's not necessarily an aspect of the voice itself. It might be, but it's more so the fact that the character is like a very it's like a very lovable character. So
Okay.
it's an association with the voice.
And is that association present at the moment of the beep?
No, it's just a comforting voice in that moment, a comforting familiar voice.
And so there's some sense of this voice is comforting at that moment.
It's
Uh,
not that this, I don't know if it's that this voice is comforting.
okay.
It's that this, I wouldn't even say that I would say that, sorry, I wouldn't even say that I'm hearing a voice in experience. It's that I'm hearing a person in my experience. Maybe I should have actually used that vocabulary from the start.
Okay.
I'm hearing this person, and the person is a comforting, familiar person.
Okay. And is this person this is a character from a game, yes?
Yes. Hmm.
And is this character a uh like a like an animation, like a
It is,
fictional
yeah.
character?
Hmm.
Okay. So this individual, like I hear this individual and this individual is comforting. I take you to be saying that's kind of what's going
Yes.
on.
I would say I hear this woman specifically because
Okay.
there was like it was in my experience was the fact that the voice was that of a female.
Okay. And then did she have a name at the time of the experience, or is it just I
No.
hear a female? Okay.
So I think I have quite a different sense that you might have, Amber, about what we just said here.
Okay.
Because I hear Gabriel saying, I'm hearing the woman say, whatever it is that she says, trusting him is. And the fact that she's a cartoon character is immaterial.
Yeah.
This is a woman in
I
this is a
yeah.
woman in this scenario that I'm partaking in.
Yeah.
And I hear him to be saying, descriptively, I can say that the voice is that the person, the woman, is a comforting, friendly, lovable woman. But I'm not thematically making a big deal about or a deal about that at all at the moment of the beat. But it's
Right.
just I hear the voice, and the voice has those characteristics which I have learned to
Yep.
associate with.
Mhm.
Okay.
That's what I got. Okay. Are we good about that?
I'm good about that.
Okay. And the triangles, tell
I
me
guess I
more.
did have one more question about that.
Okay.
So when you say she's saying trusting him is, does that mean she's saying a sentence and the beep comes while she's saying trusting him is, and the sentence keep on going? Or, so my experiences of hearing a sentence which is interrupted by the beep, or does it seem like I'm have somehow pulled out these words, trusting him is, and that's what I am hearing. I'm not hearing a flowing sentence. I'm hearing three words.
Um, I think I was hearing three words. Yes, I was hearing three words. Although that I guess that does give me a question, which is I couldn't have an experience of a sentence as interrupted by the beep, right?
You could,
Because
you could or could not.
I could not like have a sample. Like it wouldn't technically be possible to have a sample of a sentence that was interrupted by a beep, right? Because then the beep can't be part of the sample because it's supposed to be the moment preceding the beep, right?
Okay, I'll agree with that.
Okay. Uh,
But the question is whether I hear what, and when my experience is this woman speaking a speaking a coherent sentence that had a beginning and it'll have an end, and it's the when the beep comes, it stops that, so I don't get to hear what the end is. Or does it seem like I've heard some words, and these words, in my experience, aren't part of a sentence?
uh,
So the real distinction is that there are some people who I'm pretty convinced
mhm.
hear sort of semantic free words. I hear this word and then I hear the next word and then I hear the next word and then I hear the next word. And I never experience myself as hearing a sentence. I get the sentence. People are talking to me in sentence. I understand what's going on in the sentence, but I have my own experience is not of accumulating the sentence. It's of hearing this word and then hearing that word and then hearing this other word. And the processing that makes a sentence out of that is not in my experience at all. I never hear a sentence. I just hear a word. And I'm trying
Hmm.
to find out whether your experience is of hearing a sentence or hearing a chunk.
Okay. I don't know how, well, I don't know the answer to that question because I don't know what it would be like to be the opposite of what I currently have. So like if you're either one or the other, I don't know what the other's like. So it would be hard for me to know. Um, I do think this was a chunk that I've heard, but the other thing is this is I yeah, that I have another question which might help me answer this or at least think about it better the next time, which is because um you can't I couldn't have in my experience the beep interrupting the sentence. Uh Presumably that means that the beep could hmm, okay. So let's say I was somebody who heard whole sentences in my experience, right? Uh that would imply that if the beep went off in the middle of a sentence, then that sentence would not, I would not have any words from that sentence in my experience at the moment of that beep, because the sentence hadn't finished yet. So I wouldn't be able to have the whole sentence in my experience. And since I don't have single words in my experience, uh, the words that were interrupted wouldn't be there either. Is that true? Would you agree with that?
I don't think I would agree with that.
Okay.
So, so the difference is something like if I'm at a baseball game and I see the pitcher delivering the pitch, I'm watching a baseball game, and the beep comes while the pitcher's delivering the pitch. I could say I'm seeing the pitcher deliver the pitch. There's a sense there is a sense in which that's not true because the beep happened before the pitch actually got delivered.
Hmm.
But what I am seeing in a straightforward descriptive sense is I'm seeing the pitcher deliver the pitch. And I could also say at the moment of the beep, I was seeing the pitcher wrap his left leg around his right leg, right waist. And that could be true too. That could be true too.
Hmm.
And there are some pitchers whose delivery is weird enough that you pay attention to the way that the left leg goes. I don't know whether you're a baseball fan or not. I'm not much of a baseball fan either, but there are some instances where the mechanics of the pitch of the delivery is as interesting or more interesting at some particular moment than the delivery itself.
Okay.
And so the question is, at the moment of the beep, in this imaginary situation, am I watching a guy deliver a pitch, or am I watching his leg wrap around his waist? And the scene is the same, and the beep is the same, but in one instance, I'm interested in the mechanics of the way this guy, how does he move his leg, and in the other, I'm interested in the
Okay.
this guy's in the process of setting up a situation where the guy's either going to hit it or
Okay.
you know. and the experience I think is pretty different from the one situation to the next. One is I'm watching the pitch delivery so as to see the game, and the other is I'm interested in the guy's mechanics.
Hmm. That makes sense to me. But I also have another question about it, which is you said that you could say that you're seeing the pitch be delivered, although in a sense that might be technically wrong because the pitch hasn't yet been delivered. Um, and I would say I think maybe there are two different kinds of. I think the reason it seems to me that the reason there's a uh, you could say both is because there's two different senses of being delivered. Like one is the sense of I've seen the ball reach its target or destination, and then the other is the sense of I'm observing the process of delivery.
So I agree. I totally agree with that.
Okay.
And I think it is a rabbit hole that most people, other than philosopher type kinds, people with philosophy's interest, don't generally fall into.
Hmm.
Because I think we could break down what the delivery that you were talking about, the word delivery, you divided into two. I'll bet I could divide it into four because it has to do with, whether the ball just leaves my fingertips or whether it just arrives in the catcher's mitt.
Hmm.
Or we could break it down into eight. I'm guessing we could break that down
Yeah,
as
I suppose so.
rabbit holely infinite or something like that.
Hmm.
But what I would say is that there are, broadly speaking, sort of two ways that the beep can happen in my scenario. One is I'm interested in the mechanics, and the other is I'm interested in the game. And in both cases, I'm seeing the guy's leg kick. And in the one case, it's just an incidental feature of the progress of the game, and in the other, it's the center of my attention.
Okay.
And if I want to break that down, I could say, it's a leg kick. Is it really wrapping around, or is it the way my toe goes up before I wrap it around, or whatever? I could break that down too if I wanted to. But that doesn't change the fact that in an important way, the, these are distinctions that lead away from the experience rather than towards it.
You're right. I feel like that makes sense because otherwise Yes. I
And so
think
it,
that makes sense to me.
and so in our example that we've got going here, and as a general rule, I think the way you get out of the rabbit hole is by sticking with the individual experience. And in the end,
Okay.
so the question is, in this individual experience, is your experience of 3 words more or less divorced from anything else? I got these 3 words. Or is your experience of the delivery of a sentence that had some words before that and probably have some words after that, but had these 3 words, and those 3 words are where the beep happened to come?
Um, I think it was 3 words that were part of the delivery of a sentence. I think that's a more the most accurate way I can think of it.
Okay.
But I was curious, in general, and I know you probably can't like, say for sure, but in general, when it comes to those people that are one sentence at a time,
1 word at a time.
how it what was that?
1 word at a time.
Or not one word at a time, but they get whole sentences. They don't
Okay.
experience like the same. What would generally be in one their experience if a sentence was interrupted at a beep?
Well, there's two ways that happens in the real world.
Okay.
Somebody would say, I was hearing this person say, well, trusting him is a good thing because he's a good guy or something like that. And the beep came sort of in the trusting him is portion. That would be sort of a natural way to.
Okay.
And some other people would say that the beep came right at the end of the sentence. There's a lot of
Really? Even if it didn't?
even well, then we got to keep track of what the physical beep is and the experiential beep. So I think
Okay.
what I think is for quite a few people that the the beep is not a physical event. Never for anybody. The beep is not a physical event. You hear the
Mhm.
beep. That's a result of your psychological processing. It starts in the vibration of, well, it starts in the electronics of the beeper and then becomes the vibration of the earphone and then becomes the vibration of your tympanic membrane or whatever the hell. And then
Mhm.
the nerve processes and whatever. And eventually, as the result of quite a bit of complex neurological processing, you hear a beep.
Hmm.
And some people can process that beep, do process that beep, and can say, well, the beep happened in the word him. The word, just the whole sentence was, well, you should trust him because he's a good guy, but the beep came under him. Some people would say that.
Okay.
But other people experience the beep as coming at the end of a cognitive chunk, like I'm understanding the sentence. And then
Okay.
when my processing is done understanding that sentence, then I hear a beep. And so the beep seems like it comes at the end of the sentence.
Hmm. I guess the question there is, are there is there does that happen in two different ways? Because I that could either occur because they feel the beep came at the end of um that could either be them postponing the beep in their experience. So like they process the whole sentence and then they process the beep, even though the beep happened during the sentence, or it could be that they're putting the beep earlier. So they hear the beep and then they say it came before the sentence that the beep occurred during.
I think either one of those is possible. I don't know the
Okay.
answer to that. I I think it is an interesting question. It is by far a more complicated question than my investigations allow me to pursue,
Hmm.
because there's a lot of people for example, think that, well, there's words going on all the time. That is pretty manifestly not true. But then to wonder whether the word is coming here or two words later, that's a pretty fine point by comparison
Right.
to whether there are words at all.
Okay.
But the whole notion, I think, is sort of captured in the Saturday Night Live video about the headache. That I think we could analyze this concept of headache up into up into a million different kinds of things, you know. Do my eyes seem to track? Does this seem like on the right side or on the left side? We could break that up and we could say, well, you know, you got to have 17 of these 25 before you can call it a headache or whatever.
Hmm.
And we can figure it out by sending a blood sample to a centrifuge and on out to, you know, American laboratories or whatever the hell it was. And but the issue is for most people, they would say I have a headache,
Okay.
and
Right.
it doesn't require further analysis.
Right. And I do see how like analyzing it further does to some extent seem to like lead away from it because I don't know if somebody would say that the experience of like 50 million different elements is the experience of a headache.
That's right. It's not.
Okay.
And so in this situation right now, I could say I'm seeing a black thing in the bottom right hand corner, and then there's a yellow line, and then there's another yellow line, and then there's
Hmm.
the letter B, and then there is a lowercase u and a lowercase case I and a out of focus sort of at a 2-degree angle to the right. I could say all those things together, and eventually, after several thousand of those, I could say, oh, this guy's he sees a Zoom window.
Hmm.
When actually, experientially, the case is, well, I'm seeing the Zoom window, or I'm seeing Gabriel talk in a Zoom window, and those things are, I think, for most people, pretty much directly present,
Hmm.
but not for everybody, and that is vitally interesting to me because I don't want to assume that everybody has experiential gestalten in the same way that I do, or the same way that I
Hmm.
think most people do. I'm delighted to find somebody whose inner experience seems to go together in an unusual way.
Hmm.
But what I don't want to do is to have it be sort of an artifact of a descriptive bent.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And I definitely I feel like I'm beginning to more fully understand this idea when it comes to visual stuff. Uh, um, uh, I it's I'm still trying to apply it to the understanding to um, non-visual as well.
Well, in the second beat today, you
Hmm.
said I was hearing this guy in a southern accent say Monday night.
Right.
That was not visual, as I understood it.
Hmm. Hmm.
But I also gathered you to be quite confidently apprehending that's what I was hearing.
Hmm.
It would have seemed weird to you, I'm guessing, if I had asked you back in that beat, well, did you hear mun and then hear day and then hear n and then hear eh? You would have
Hmm.
said, oh
Right.
no, I heard Monday night.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, that would have definitely been yeah. Hmm.
And it's true in some sense that you heard and then you heard mun or un and then you heard the whatever. That is true in some sense, but it's not true in the sense of your straightforward experiential
Hmm.
apprehension.
Right. Right. Okay. The implication of this. So the reason that there's a difference between the visual and uh the reason that my understanding is harder for the non-visual stuff is because I feel like the implication uh has you explained how the implicate this isn't the implication for visual stuff, but in this case I feel like the implication is that I didn't actually have a verbal or an auditory experience if I didn't also experience those things. I just had the sensate or the experience of thinking that I was experiencing them. But I remember what you said about the visual stuff, which is uh if you assume it's in you said generally speaking, I think you said something like you can't imagine that like visual experience is the same thing as a picture. And I definitely understand that. Like there will be parts of it that are not defined. And I guess that's true for auditory as well. So I think I do understand this. I'm getting the hang of this. It's solidifying in my brain. So the auditory experience isn't something that you could put on a recording.
So the one of the fundamental, maybe a fundamental interest of mine, is whether this is a character, whether the difficulty that you have with this auditory stuff, whether that's a characteristic of your experience or a characteristic of the description of the experience or a characteristic of a philosophical point of view that you have about experience. And and I don't know the answer to that. I would like to know the answer to that. That's
What I can tell you, what I can tell you is that uh, even if it is an aspect of like some sort of philosophical quandary, um, that's not what it doesn't feel like that to me. Uh, it doesn't, in other words, it doesn't feel like I have an experience and I'm just doubting myself or anything like that. I'm actually trying to, as clearly as I can, report what was in my head. And it's not like I'm thinking, oh, well, that can't have been what was in my head. Um, or at least if that is the case, I don't know that's what I'm doing. So
well, and that is the quandary. So are we talking about, and specifically here, is the issue whether I should say what was in my experience was trusting him is, or whether I should say my experience is of a sentence which included the words trusting him is? Is that the where the rubber meets the road about?
it is. And I am very tempted to say that I think maybe both of those were in my experience.
And would it also make sense to say that tra was in my experience and ust was in my experience and ing was in my experience and him was in my experience?
It makes less sense, but I'm not sure if that's just because it seems more absurd or if it's because it's actually less accurate. But I if I was to put money on it, I would say it does not the second one does not make sense. That it does not make sense to say tra and st was in my experience, but it does make sense to say the word chunk trusting him is was in my experience, and those words were as part of a sentence were part of it was in my experience.
Okay. And then I guess I was a little more extremely absurd than I had to be. So how about just the word is?
Uh I I I think so. I think that was in my experience. I think each of those three words was in my experience.
So in my experience, in the gestalten of my experiences, I have the word trusting and the word him and the word is and the three-word chunk trusting him is and the sentence that had included those words, whatever that sentence was, which we've forgotten.
Uh, well, the sentence that had, not the whole sentence, because in my experience, uh, when the beep occurred, the beep interrupted a sentence, or at least that's how I experienced the beep.
Okay.
When I experienced the beep itself, that it was the beep interrupting a sentence. So the whole sentence wasn't in my experience, it because it hadn't even finished. But I do think that each word was in my experience, and the word chunk, trusting him was in my experience as a part of a sentence.
And then by that logic, is it also the case that in beep number 2, Monday was in my experience and night was in my experience, and the two words together were in my experience? And by in my experience, I mean I have made this is
Yes, I think so. I think so. I'm not sure if this is because I'm not 100% sure that I'm not tricking myself here, but as best as I can say, I think they were both in my experience, both the words Monday and night and Monday night.
so I think that is a fundamentally interesting question. Whether you're tricking yourself, and I'm not in a position to. It's not like I'm pretending not to know the answer, but I really know the answer.
Hmm.
I, if I knew the answer, I would tell you. The
Hmm.
I think it's a fundamentally interesting question. For sure, those words occur auditorially separate in some physical sense. They're not actually as separate as you might think, because if you ever really tried to look at the waveforms of words, the waveform of the second word is starting before the waveform of the first word is done. If you
Mm.
get really into the analysis of that, and that becomes evident if you're trying to learn a foreign language. The hardest part about learning a foreign language is figuring out where one word stops and the other word starts.
Mm.
Somebody else is speaking in German to me. I speak a little German. What's hard is to know which word, whether this sound was part of the last word or part of the next word.
Mm.
But experientially, like that's really the question. Do I
Right.
really hear Monday? Do I hear Monday and then hear night, or do I hear Monday night? And there's quite a bit of philosophical argument about it. Well, it can't be just one word. You can't just hear one word, because there's a lot of words that are homophonic or whatever, ambiguous, and you can't tell what that word meant until you hear the rest of the sentence, bear and bear, and until you hear the end of the sentence, you didn't really know what the word bear was. But the fact of the matter is, if the beep comes on the word bear, and you might have had even an example of this, where if the word comes on the word bear, you know which one it means, even though that's not possible at the moment of the beep.
Hmm. Right.
And so the question that I would like us to try to answer is, what is present in my experience, and divorce that away from what has to be the case because of the logic of the
Hmm.
situation.
I am doing my best to do that, and I think that I do think that I am. It like again, if I had to put money on it, I would say I am divorcing it from what I think logically makes sense. Especially since I think I am pretty convinced at this point of the idea of this being the case with visual stuff, because we had, I think it was the meeting that got erased. Um, but we did talk about this for a little bit, and discussed how there could be like sort of undefined characteristics in visual experience. Um, and so I think I can accept that. And I think I can accept it for auditory stuff as well. So I don't think this is coming from a logical conclusion, like a logical deduction or something like that.
So what I'm not a linguist, but what I think is that people don't speak in words. It's actually not true that people speak in words.
Hmm.
Because to say, well, people speak in words makes it seem like, well, there's one word and then there's another word and then there's another word. And I don't think that's actually really true. And part of the reason I don't think that is from what I was just talking about, foreign languages are really one word running into the next. And it's not that there's one word and then another word. There's this grunt followed by that grunt. And this grunt is tapering off and that grunt is beginning. And it's not the case that this is a word and that's a word. I'm in the process of communicating and I'm grunting at you, and the grunts are in one manner of speaking words, but in another manner of speaking something more or less, something less discreetly definable.
Mm-hmm.
And
I mean, that does make sense to me.
and one way to tell the difference is to listen to somebody who's acquired the language as an adult. You know, listen to a Chinese speaker who came to the United States and encountered English for the first time at age 15 or something like that. Their words are they definitely do speak in words
Mm-hmm.
because they learn to speak in words. And I don't think developmentally a native speaker learns to speak in words. I think they learn to grunt.
Hmm. Okay. And I'm not sure how this applies to, I'm not sure how this applies to the discussion we're having about, I, how does this apply to the discussion we were just having? I'm having difficulty seeing the connection, but I can tell that it's there.
So I don't think the beep happens as a discrete thing. I think the
Mm-hmm.
beep happens. It sounds discrete, but it really is smeared over some amount of time, maybe quite a lot of time for some people. I think actually for some people it's actually on the order of seconds. You know, the process of hearing what seems like the rapid onset of the beep actually happens if you could chart the neurology through their nervous system. It takes a second or two for that to happen, I think.
Okay.
And I think the same thing is true in speaking. So when I'm speaking, I'm not just speaking this word, but I'm also anticipating speaking the next word. And not only am I anticipating speaking the next word, but I'm also anticipating speaking the word after that.
Mm-hmm.
And so the process of and when I'm listening to you speak, for example, I'm doing the same thing. I'm hearing the word that you're speaking now. That is what seems like the word that you're speaking now, but that's colored by the words that's coming next. And I don't actually hear the word that you're speaking now because in the real world, I never have. I wonder whether he means bear or bear, but I never actually have that experience. It
Mm-hmm.
always seems to me like I know exactly which word he means.
Right.
And that has to mean that I'm folding my experience back in time, and I'm hearing things whose processing took place seconds later.
Mm-hmm.
And so so when DES asks, well, what was going on at the moment of the beep? It might seem like a beep that's there's the microsecond before the beep and a microsecond after the beep, and the beep happens at this exact time. Well, I don't think that's actually true. It seems like that's true for many people, most people probably. And the speaking seems like it's this word and then this word and this word. That's not probably even true either. So the question is, what's happening in your experience And the experience is, well, I heard a beep and it was at the end of the sentence, or it was after this word, or it was, or my experience could be one word and then another word and then another word and then another word. And it doesn't ever seem to me like I hear a whole sentence. But for somebody else, is well, I hear a whole sentence and the beep came in the middle of the sentence. And obviously it wasn't in the middle of the sentence because there wasn't anything after the beep, that, logically speaking.
Right.
But actually it's a complicated
Yes.
construction. Everything is a constructed deal. Here there's a construction. Applying the beep to the other S is a construction, and we don't fully understand what that's about. But I think the one of the primary reasons that we don't know it is that people haven't tried to at least find out, well, what does it seem like? What carefully examine what does seem to be happening at the moment of the beep. We can start there, and if we knew the answer to that question well, then we would be in a position to say, well, the beep isn't really where you thought it was. The beep is before that or after that or whatever. Those would be totally interesting questions to digest and chew on.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, I accept it. I accept what you're saying. I think it does make sense to me. And so I don't think I'm running into a logical problem when it comes to reporting here. Uh, uh, it's still possible that I am, and that like somehow philosophically I'm getting myself into a quandary. But I do feel like I get each word, and I feel like I get the whole sentence, or the whole chunk in this case.
Well, as to whether you're getting yourself in a quandary, that is the notion of what I generally refer to as presuppositions. And I think that presuppositions are wily adversaries,
Hmm.
and they make you believe things that are not true about yourself.
Okay.
And I also think sincerely that I'm not in a position to judge whether you have presuppositions or not.
Hmm.
If
But
I,
I do accept that I may have hiding presuppositions that are messing with my ability to figure this out here. And I do think that I even though I think that I get each word, and that's what I'd put my money on, um, I do think that I probably need to do maybe a few more beeps to figure it out for sure.
and I totally agree with that. And what I would say is that part of the reason that DES works in the way that it does, which is to say multiple sessions across multiple times, is that I think we need to have these conversations,
Hmm.
and there's no way to have these conversations except when they're of import.
Hmm.
And so the conversation that we're having right now about trusting him is, I think that's water over the dam. We're never going to figure out what that experience was like, but it might help us next week,
Okay.
whatever. And that's not a weakness of yours, and it's not a weakness of mine. It is that this is the way the process has to go. And very few people, if anybody other than us, well, maybe in Eastern cultures, maybe, but in Western scientific cultures, there are very few people who are engaged in this kind of task, which I think is the necessary task to answer the kind of
Hmm.
questions that we have.
Okay. I'm curious if you ever have you tried measuring how long the beep is for people, like how spread out it is?
I've never tried to measure it.
Okay.
I think those are very complicated. I have written in my early work about schizophrenia that I think that individuals with schizophrenia might have several seconds of a delay in how
Hmm.
long it takes them to process some kind of visual processing.
Hmm.
I've got some in that book. I think I have some examples of why I think that. But but if you stop and think about sort of the common delusions of that people who are deluded have, is that that they control the world. You know, that kind of world controlling delusion could come from just a timing deal.
Okay.
If I think about turning on the light switch and then I turn on the light switch, but the light seems to come on before I reach for the switch, and that's just a processing deal that my processor of the physical world is slower than my processing of the visual world. Well, then it
Right.
seems like I can thought control
Okay.
the light.
Hmm.
And that could be, you know, much of that could be timing issue.
Okay. I remember an experiment that's somewhat similar to that, where every time like you click, a screen turns orange with a slight delay or something like that, and then you have somebody continuously do that, and then eventually you take away the delay, and then they start feeling like the orange happens before they click. So it seems it's kind of like timing getting messed up.
I do think timing can get messed up.
Hmm.
And I think that's a totally interesting kind of a thing. So for example, I when I make transcripts of the interviews like we're doing here, which I do
Hmm.
sort of a lot, I I will very often play those transcripts at not normal speed. I'll play them at 1.3 times as fast or whatever because it takes 70% less time to do it or whatever.
Hmm.
And sometimes I play them at slow speed if I want to try to get the words right or whatever. I play them at 70% speed. And if I do that for long enough, eventually it seems like that's a normal speed.
Hmm.
So timing, and then I go back to 100% speed and it seems really weird.
Hmm.
Uh, but if you were to walk in on me while I'm listening to an interview at 130%, you'd say, well, how can you possibly be paying attention to that? Seems like seems like normal.
Hmm.
And I would say, and I think we're sort of on a side to an aside here, but and I have created a series of what I call lectlets, miniature lectures for my statistics class. And so people tune into those, and I've given them control over how fast they can listen to my voice, basically talking to them.
Hmm.
And the reason that I did that was that a student, said to me, if you could, if you talked faster, it would be easier for me. I'm a little hyper kind of a guy. And
Hmm.
if you could talk faster, I would comprehend better.
Hmm.
And I said, well, I don't know whether that's true or not, but I can make myself talk faster. So I put a control on the playback deal, so people can make me talk faster, make me talk slower, whatever works for them. I don't really know or care actually, but whatever works. I do care, but I don't need to figure out for you whether it works. You can play around a bit,
Right.
see what works for you for whatever reason. But the bottom line is the Saturday Night Live sketch is is it the case that there is a gestalt about a headache, or a gestalt about a visual experience, or a gestalt about a verbal exchange? And if so, what is it? And do we get it? Does do I end up having that gestalt, or do I have to break it down? And do I break it down and somehow compute the gestalt later on?
Right.
And I definitely don't want to talk you into it and have you, well, just I'll try to make him happy. I'll report that I hear a whole sentence that seems what he wants to hear me say, and so I'll just say that. That would be the worst possible outcome
Hmm.
for me. I am interested. So I've sampled with a fair number of professional philosopher types, and it's quite frustrating for me to do that because they seem to claim that they got no experience or they don't know what the hell I'm asking, or they're off on some kind of a tangent and I can't bring them back to what I think experience is. And I would like to know why that is. I would genuinely like to know why that is. You know, so I'm too dense to be able to follow a really good philosopher. That a lot of them seem to think that, and that might be true. And or do they not have inner experience of the kind that I imagine most people have? I don't know. And I think that
philosophy just melted their brains.
well, I think it's possible that their philosophical position is more important to them than the actualities of their own phenomena. And if that's the case, then paying attention to the actual, and if the actualities of their own phenomena contradict their philosophical position, well, then something's got to give. And it's either the philosophical position or the actualities of their experience. And to the extent that the philosophical position is important to them, then experience goes out the window. I think that's possible. And I also think it's possible that their experience is substantially different from something, or their experience, I shouldn't say different from, I should say their experience is in such a way that it forms the substrate of whatever their philosophical position is.
Yeah, that's definitely possible as well. Do you think it's possible that I don't know. I mean, I guess it's probably possible, but I would imagine it's unlikely. But what if like being exposed to certain philosophical idea eventually molds your experience to fit it?
I do think that's true.
What was that?
I think that's true.
Okay.
And not just any philosophical position, but anything. I think your experiences alter.
Okay. Well, this is definitely giving me a lot to think about. Is it possible that like I could get the recording of this by any chance? Because I might want to go over it again.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you.
And you want all the recordings or just this one?
Just this one for now.
Okay.
Thank you.
It's take me an hour probably to. It takes Zoom about an hour to make a.
Okay. No worries.
So I will send it to you